So throughout the time that I've been posting content on this channel, I've covered all different types of people: weirdos, scammers, predators, but worst of all, industry plants. And surprisingly, even to this day, industry plantation is still a very heavily contested subject, with a lot of people making videos about people like Jumix, Kid Boo, Icy Narco, and I pretty well covered them all. But among this group of people who honestly did have a pretty shady come up and have done some pretty strange stuff, there's one person who stands out but yet always gets lumped in with them, and that's the man known as Smilez. Now it's pretty clear that he gets lumped in with them because he has a very distinct color. He's all yellow, and it definitely seems like something a label would put onto an artist to try to sell them to the mainstream, but he actually doesn't have a label backing him whatsoever, and his only real crime for so many people to come out against him online is the fact that he has rich parents. So let's get into the story of Smilez, or Jack Bruno as he used to go by, and I'll tell you really how everything went down. Bruno Muscala Jr. was born November 20th, 1992 in Texas, being the youngest in his family with one older brother, but the most notable family member would be his father, Bruno Muscala Sr., the man that he's actually named after. And that's because his father is a self-made millionaire who immigrated over from Italy, worked alongside his two brothers Tony and Guy, and started up a hair care company that would later expand all the way across Europe. That company is known as Tony and Guy, and for some reason they didn't include Bruno's name in there, but either way he made a lot of money, and when his two brothers ended up passing away, he would take over the CEO position and become even more wealthy. It's a pretty inspiring tale, a true rags to riches story that everybody can get on board with. A poor Italian immigrant coming over to America and making his fortune. Everybody loves that. But then there's Smilez, the second millionaire in the family, and people aren't as happy about that. People love to see the underdog get rich, but once they have the money and they pass it down to future generations, well, people aren't as happy about that anymore because then they become the establishment. But anyways, let's not get off topic and get back to Smilez. So as you already know, he grew up pretty wealthy, but he was still somewhat of a rebellious kid, listening to punk bands like Blink-182 and Green Day, and eventually teaching himself how to play guitar. He would often lock himself in his room for hours at a time trying to teach himself how to play guitar.
You think you're so good at guitar? Check out what these hands can do.
And at the same time, his brother would introduce him to a couple of rappers like Tupac, Eminem, and Snoop Dogg. This gave him a love for both styles of music, incorporating both sounds into his music later on in life. His real musical journey began around the age of 14 when his family moved over to LA and he started playing in a band known as Drive A. First got attention when playing in a battle of the bands at the local high school, and then after that they ended up actually having a pretty serious career, doing tours, putting out albums, and just overall having a bit of a buzz all across California. But despite the band's growing popularity, Smilez never really saw it as a big time thing that he wanted to do for the rest of his life. He definitely appreciated the experience of being able to go all across the country and have cool experiences, but he still desired to be a bigger act and he wanted to put even more time into his music. On top of that, he wanted to break away from his father's shadow, because even though on the outside most fans didn't know that his father had a lot of money and was funding his career, and even though their fan base was never really aware of the fact that he had money behind the scenes, people within the industry would often call him out for being a daddy's boy and taking handouts from his father, so he decided to set out on his own and try to make his own money working at a pizza place. He figured if he could make his own music, pay for his own stuff, people would finally respect him, but it didn't end up mattering in the long run because people still put him in that box no matter what he did. But despite that, he still put a year of work into the pizza place, saving up money to buy his own recording equipment, and then he also worked as a ghostwriter on the side, which helped him build up his own connections within the industry that would later pay off. After that, he ended up joining another band called Raw Fabrics, which was even more successful than his first band, with them putting out 2 studio albums called Golden Handcuffs and Plastic Joy, and even going on a nationwide tour. But even with everything going well with his band, Smilez would describe this time in his life as the darkest that he ever went through, because he was falling into his vices, drinking every day, doing hard drugs, and this eventually led to the deterioration of the band, and it fell apart not long after that. After 2 years, he was able to become sober though. I'm not really sure how. I'm not sure if he went to detox or he just was able to kick it on his own accord, but either way, he saw the writing on the wall and he realized that punk bands just weren't the way to get success anymore, and rap was the new wave that was popping up around 2016. He saw this new ignorant wave of rap coming up with people like Famous Dex, Lil Uzi Vert, Lil Yachty, Uno the Activist, but the one that he gravitated to the most was definitely Playboi Carti, being heavily inspired by the fact that he was blending punk elements into his rap music in a way that he had never seen before. So in a way, when you think about it, Smilez really is the original opium, right? Right? No? Okay, let's move on. During the entire time that he was playing with his bands, he was going under the name Jack, so when he became a rap artist, he decided to name himself 92 Jack, dropping his first album, Manifesting a Pop Star, in 2018. Which right off the bat included a couple features from Famous Dex and Smoke Purp, which were pretty big artists. They were kind of on the fall off around that time. Smoke Purp is debatable, but Famous Dex was definitely on the outs by that point. But either way, they were big features and a lot of people took notice. And he also began to play as an opener for acts like Lil Skies, Lil Pump, Wiz Khalifa, and most notably Tekashi 6ix9ine. He ended up playing as an opener for one of the shows off the World Domination Tour that Tekashi was doing all through Europe, because if you didn't know, Tekashi was always kind of big in America, but over there in Europe he was huge. This was one of the first times that Tekashi was playing over there, so a lot of people were already pretty hyped up to see him, and on top of that he was about an hour late, so by the time that Jack took the stage, the audience was so upset from waiting that they started booing and he didn't even get to perform. Which would be a pretty dark experience for any artist. It's never a good feeling to get booed off stage and not be able to perform the music that you were paid to be there for, but either way he turned a negative into a positive and became quick friends with Trife Drew and Just for Cannon, who both played a pretty big part in the comeback of Tekashi 6ix9ine post 2020 after all the snitching, so getting in good with them was definitely a good connection and it made it so that show wasn't a complete bust. After that, in 2019, Jack dropped his album 0001, which included a Playboi Carti feature, which probably became the most controversial part of his entire career. And that's because once again people thought that Jack was trying to buy his way into the industry with his parents' money, but the real story behind that was that he actually worked with a producer known as Hit Boy, who was able to get him the feature. He had to pay half of it up front, using all of the savings that he had from the pizza place, and then after that his parents paid the other half, because his parents basically told him that they wanted him to be a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, and they would only invest in his career if he actually showed true promise. But even with a big time feature like that, he was still having a hard time finding a solid fan base, so he looked around him one more time, noticing people like Lil Yachty and Lil Pump, who had a very distinct look that really helped him out in the music industry, so he decided to create his own character, dyeing his hair yellow, putting a smiley face on the back of his head, and then dressing in all yellow for the next couple years. And with this new look, he would rebrand himself for the final time from Jack Bruno to Smilez. And this wasn't just something he would do for his music videos. He actually wore yellow everywhere he went for 2 years' time, really catching the attention of people on the streets when he was walking through LA. And keep in mind, this is LA, so almost everybody looks weird over there. But despite that, he still managed to stand out. He would end up dropping his first single, Head and Shoulders, not too long after that, and then 2 days later he ended up appearing as a feature on Tekashi 6ix9ine's comeback album known as Tattletales. And this was a pretty big deal because I know in 2024 Tekashi 6ix9ine doesn't really matter anymore, but in 2020 everybody was tapped in with what he was doing. He was doing crazy antics, he just had his big comeback with Gooba, and everybody wanted to hear what that first album back would sound like. But I think even more important than that, people really wanted to see what features would appear on this album. He already got a collaboration with Nicki Minaj, Akon, so who was going to appear on this album? What big names would be there? Well, when the track list eventually leaked, it was Left Side, Smilez, DJ Academic,
Free my tax, free 699, freeze.
and that's it. So Smilez was basically catching shit from both sides of things. People in 6ix9ine's fan base weren't happy with him because they didn't want him to be on the album in the first place, and then people in the broader industry were starting to see him as an industry plant. Most people had no awareness that he dropped any music under Jack Bruno or played in any bands before that point, and all they saw was Head and Shoulders and then the big time feature on Tattletales with the track Charlie, and they were like, yeah, that's definitely an industry plant. And when you look at it, it's almost the exact same thing as Baby Goth, because she also released a feature on a Trippie Redd album before she had any music, and then after that she got a single with both Lil Xan and Trippie Redd, so Smilez basically did the exact same thing, only in reverse, but people had already seen this happen before and wrote him off right away. In the days following the release of Tattletales, a couple pictures would start to surface online of 6ix9ine and Smilez in a yellow room where it looked like they were filming a music video, so a lot of people in the fan base would start to wonder if a Charlie music video was on the way. And funnily enough, back in 2020, I actually messaged Smilez and asked him if it was coming out, and he told me I wouldn't be disappointed, but I ended up being disappointed, and I never forgave him after that. No, I'm just kidding, it wasn't that big of a deal. Apparently there was supposed to be a Charlie music video, but after the album flopped, 6ix9ine was completely demotivated to do anything else. He decided to stop making music for about 6 months and basically faded away, leaving Smilez to deal with all the criticism and backlash on his own. Soon after that, he dropped a music video with Snoop Dogg for his track Happy, where he was seen on the block with a bunch of gangsters and guns around him, which was supposed to be satirical, but a lot of people didn't see it as that and were offended, thinking that he was appropriating gang culture. And another weird thing about the video is that Snoop Dogg was actually green screened into it, so it kind of looked funny in that way. I think it was posted on on Worldstar at one point, but it seems like it's been deleted. I'm not really sure what the reason for that is, but either way, it seems like Smilez's reputation was getting worse and worse by the day. People thought he was an industry plant, they thought that he was appropriating gang culture, that he was corny, that he was a fake, so things really weren't going well. Even worse than that, his older brother would pass away not long after that from a fentanyl overdose, leaving his kids behind to be taken care of by the rest of the family and leaving him without a brother. So of course Smilez would go into a dark place after this point. He couldn't take the hate that he was getting online on top of all the family tragedy and everything going on around it, so he decided to take a step back from music and he began throwing parties in what he called the Smilez room. So the history behind that is that after his brother passed away, he would ask his mother if he could paint a corner of the garage yellow so he could film music videos on his own in his own home, and his mother, in attempts to cheer him up after the passing of his brother, decided to paint the entire garage yellow. And when Smilez got back and saw that, he had absolutely no idea what to do with it, so he decided to start throwing parties there, citing the fact that a lot of parties in LA were very exclusive and you could only get in if you had connections or knew somebody or had status. So he decided to start throwing parties where anybody could get in, anybody could have a good time, and he stayed sober throughout the entire experience. And around that same time, he ended up starting up his own brand of energy drinks, which ended up being pretty successful. He was able to network with some artists, and he wasn't making music, but he was definitely making himself known within LA. And eventually he would move away from the whole Smilez persona. He was still going by the name because that's what he was mostly known for, so he didn't want to change that, but he stopped wearing all yellow and started to change his music back into a more punk influenced rap as opposed to the more brain dead stuff he was doing during 2020. He would begin to gear up to drop a new album meant to pay homage to his fallen brother, but around the time that he was trying to do that, a new video would drop on a YouTube channel called Matty Balls, talking about the fact that he was an industry plant and kind of exposing the whole fact that he had rich parents and that's how he bought his career. At first, Smilez was upset that people were dredging up his past again, and he was a little bit upset that YouTubers were trying to make content off of his entire life story and paint him in a bad light, but after he watched it a couple times, he decided that if he didn't give his 2 cents, then people would be able to run off with the story, so it was better that he corrected the record right away. He ended up doing an interview with Matty Balls where he explained to the world that he actually did have rich parents, and he wasn't trying to cover it up, but he also didn't want it to be the main thing that people thought about when they thought about his music. He worked for some of the stuff on his own, although his parents definitely did help him out. He made the connection with Tekashi on his own, Playboy Cardi he paid for half of it, and he basically just explained the entire story in his own words, and a lot of people really respected the fact that he wasn't trying to cover it up or hide anything and was very open and honest about his entire career. Soon after that, he dropped his album You're in My World, which was more punk inspired, and a lot of people really seemed to like this album. I in particular really liked the track Party Party Party. I ended up listening to it after the Matty Balls video came out, and I was pretty surprised that Smilez was actually able to make some pretty decent music when he wasn't trying to play a character. And even though his broader image online is definitely still seen in a pretty negative light, it seems like with the new music that he's dropping now, a lot of old fans and new fans alike are coming together to actually build up into a real fan base for the guy. So you got to give it to him. After 10 years of being in the industry, he's still working at music, and when I interviewed him, he told me that he would still be making music in another 10 years. He's never going to stop, and even if he never makes it, he just loves making it so much that that's what he wants to do with the rest of his life. So you got to respect him in that way. But there is one last thing I want to say. When it comes to the negative attention around this man online, what really did he do wrong? He had rich parents. Is it because he cheated? Is it because we hate rich people? What's the real reason that we don't like the guy? Is he just corny? I mean, he's not out here botting views like Lil Pink. He's not out here scamming like Netspend. He's not beating women. He doesn't really have any nasty charges on his name. And on top of that, there's plenty of other rich people in the industry that bought their way in. We got It's Okay to Cry. Kid Leroy also has rich parents, and even Jumix has rich parents, and he's a lot better than that guy, let me tell you. Which leads me to believe that the only crime that Smilez has committed is the fact that he's slightly corny. If we're gonna lock people up for being corny, we're gonna have to lock up the entire new generation, because let's be honest, corniness is definitely in the eye of the beholder. What I find corny might not be corny to you. But don't take this video as me trying to defend Smilez because I had a talk with him and now I want to defend his honor. It's nothing like that. I just want you guys to think a little bit deeper about why you don't like the people that you like online and why you do like the people that you do like. I think it's an interesting conversation that we can all have, and definitely leave your comments below on your thoughts about this whole video, because I'm definitely interested to see what the reaction to it will be, because I'm putting him in a more positive light when it seems like a lot of YouTubers like to tear him down and put him in a negative light. So we'll see what happens. Subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get to 20k. That's the next big check mark. You know, I'm almost to 14k, so appreciate you guys for that. And I got a second channel which I'm really trying to get to 1k. I post music, interviews, and a whole bunch of different stuff on there. If it gets to 1k, then I can live stream and react to music live. So if you want to go over there, hit a sub and listen to my reactions to music, then definitely do that. But if not, it's cool. Shout out Knife King. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.